Hi there, this is Jason from English Raven, and I've got another materials design tutorial here for you. For those of you who like the idea of teaching unplugged, you might like this one. If you're not sure what I mean by teaching unplugged, I don't want to go into it too much here, though I am going to demonstrate some of the principles of it. But to get some more information, I suggest you go on Google and you type in dogma, DOGME, language teaching, dogma language teaching, or teaching English unplugged. And you will get lots of results there, lots of blog entries, lots of references, and that will give you a really good idea of what teaching unplugged is. I think most of the people who do frequent my blog know about teaching unplugged. They know I'm a pretty strong advocate of it, and this is going to be interesting because I do believe that materials design has a role to play in teaching unplugged. We talk a lot about materials lite with when you teach unplugged, but I think you can create light materials that go quite well and actually help to facilitate teaching unplugged. But if your material design is quite good, it can add that sense of a bit more professionalism to the lesson, which can be a problem in some unplugged situations where people think, hang on, the teacher's just winging it here. He doesn't have a plan. He's got no idea. He's just sort of just really just sort of flying by the seat of his pants. But if you show through your materials design that you actually intended for this to be the method and that you're actually facilitating it through the material, it can just create a slightly more positive response from some learners who maybe are not used to an unplugged teaching approach. So what you're looking at on the screen is my summer unplugged template, I guess. Now this was made using one of the templates that I designed and demonstrated for you, like in terms of how to build it in one of the previous tutorials. All I've done is just changed my color scheme a bit, changed the outlines, changed the image to set up a template that I'm going to use for the general theme of summer. So that's what the background looks like, and this is what our working document looks like. Now, I'll just quickly skim through and show you. We've got two blank pages here with nothing whatsoever on them, and then we've got the same two pages done again but with a grid featured like this. And you know, this is pretty this is as far as my materials design goes, actually. It's just a matter of making the nice template with some sort of theme, and I think teaching unplugged can go quite well if you do go in with a very general idea. For example, where I live and teach, you know, summer's kind of on the doorstep, and when the seasons change, it can be a great idea just to take in something like that, a general theme, you know, summer, and hopefully the learners will have plenty of opinions or things to say about that, or we can help them get to that point. So I don't think that teaching unplugged means that you go in with absolutely nothing, with nothing to talk about. I think a lot of good unplugged teaching, you have a general theme of some sort that you take in that's very malleable, which by malleable I mean that the learners and the classroom and the group can move that topic in a variety of very personalized ways. So just as an example and as a template, I'm going to show you this this idea of summer. Now the reason I've got the first two pages like this blank is because I'm designing this material thinking that I'm going to present this up on an IWB, and the first two pages are basically the teacher version, and that's what I'm going to present to the class up on an interactive whiteboard, and then I can write stuff on the screen in these sections. So it basically forms a backdrop for us to do some work on the IWB. So it's just like creating a frame for your whiteboard, I guess. Whereas the second two, and you might like to use these up on your whiteboard as well, are more for the learners. This is the handout part. So when you prepare your material and print it, there'll be a double-sided handout that looks like this on one side and this on the other side. Now, these grids are really important in a sense. I'm going to just quickly show you how I made them like this, alright? because it is a good skill to have, to know how to set up this grid, and then I'm going to explain why I'm using a grid. The way to make it is pretty simple actually. You go to Insert, you go to Shapes, and you put in a text box like this, or just a box shape, okay, about the size that you want to fill up the space. Now click on that and press Copy. Now open a new document, a new blank document, okay, and paste that shape into the document by hitting Paste, and just move it over until you can see it. Now right click on that shape to add text, okay, so that you've got a cursor appearing there, and then go to Insert and insert a table, and insert just one bar of a table, just like that. Okay, so you've got a table with one bar there. Now right click inside that box and split the cells into, I'm going to do 20 because it fits this shape reasonably well. Okay, you might need to do more or less depending on the size of the grid you want to create, but I've created 20, and that creates a reasonably good square, 20 squares. I then highlight that and press Copy or Control C, and just click below it so the cursor appears below, and all I'm going to do now is paste, 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 paste right down to the bottom of this box. Okay, so we get down to about here. Right, so we've filled up that box with a grid. Now I don't want it to be black because it will look horrible if I print it and it's a really dark black grid. So I'm going to highlight all the squares now. I'm going to go to this little option here, which is your borders and stuff. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to go to the Borders and Shading option, and it will open up this menu for me. I'm going to go for a light grey color, and it's already given me the option of covering all the lines with that grey line. I'm going to leave it at half. The width of the line is going to be a half point. You could go quarter, but I'm just going to highlight, just do it. Now we've got this grid in a light grey color with reasonably thin lines. Now why have I done it in the second document? Why have I done it in a blank document? The reason I have done that is because in order to create a printed handout and that will be photocopyable, you really do need to test it out by printing it on your computer and seeing how dark are these lines, how thick are they, because we want to write over this grid. We want the learners to be able to make shapes or write sentences over this grid. And if the grid's too dark, or they won't be able to see their own writing. If it's too light, it won't copy, it won't photocopy. So I've created the grid in this second document so that I can print it and check, print it and photocopy it and see how it comes out. Is it visible without being too stark and too obtrusive? All right, now that's better than doing it in your template here. Because we don't want to have to print all this color in our template just to experiment and see what it's going to look like with our grid. So why don't we make the grid in a second document first, see how that comes out, and then we can just move it over into this document when we're satisfied that it's printable and that it's legible. And that's just a matter of, first, one more thing we have to do with this box. We click on it, we go to our format, and we get rid of the fill. This is no fill, and there is no outline. Go to Shape, Outline, and say no outline. And look, there's our grid. Okay, and then it's just a matter of copying that grid, going back to your template, and just pasting it in. Now, the really great thing about this is that your grid is now transparent, and it's mobile. You can move it anywhere you like on the screen, and that's very different from putting the grid directly into your document. I've opened up a shape and turned it into a text box and put my grid in that so that I can move it to where I want on the page without having to change everything that happens on that page. I've created another screen inside my document basically that gives me that flexibility to move stuff around. And that means that anything I do with this grid now, it's not going to affect anything else on the page. So that's why I built that the way I did. So I've got an A and a B. This is the handout version. Now, why have I made this? And let's get back to this idea of teaching unplugged. What I want to do is create options. I want to create flexibility. Now, by putting in that grid, it creates lines that can be written on. We can write on those lines, or the learners can write on those lines, and we can also write up on the whiteboard. But sometimes we want them to do tables or to draw pictures or sketches or maps or whatever. So by having a grid, when we say to the learners, why don't we make a table or something, we can just say, now make a square here. And they can just use their pen and make a square, and it's going to come out a nice looking square. It's not going to be all jerky and all over the place, and just that grid allows you to do sentence work, but also shape work, box work, that sort of thing. And this is something that I really believe in, that when you're teaching unplugged, it's really good if they can walk away at the end of the lesson with a reasonably nice looking piece of material that they contributed to, that they were part of building. But by just some careful materials design from the outset, we can facilitate that. If they've got nice neat boxes and a nice neat interface there, and then the content was basically coming from them through our unplugged teaching approach, that could just be one of those factors that makes them walk away and say, hey, this is pretty cool. I'm just going to get rid of that document now because I don't need it, and I don't need that document either. Okay, right. So how am I going to use this? Well, I think it's okay to have a plan. I think it's okay to have some ideas on how you might use your material in the unplugged classroom. I'll give you a couple of examples on different ways I might use it. I might say to the learners, look, we've got this theme of summer. Let's have a quick chat about summer. Why don't you all, I'd say to the students, just go to the top part of your grid there and say, draw in 4 boxes. And like when you're doing this with a pen, it's considerably quicker than what I'm doing here. But they'll just convert this top part of their grid by turning it into 4 boxes just by drawing outlines over the top of the grid. And I'll say to them, I want you to think of summer and think of 4 words in English that you associate with summer. And they may come up with words like sand, sun, hot, holiday, whatever. Every learner will be different, but a lot of them will think of the same basic words. Now, with my materials design here, I've left this section to the side blank. And this to me is what I would call classwork. And this is as the learners are here, say, coming up with words they associate with summer, and we're sharing them with the group, and I'm writing them up on the whiteboard, they can also write down these words, because we may discuss what some of these words mean. We may discuss characteristics of these words, and they've got space here on their worksheets to either just write down the words that they hear other students using, or just some notes about some of them. And I think this is really important in an unplugged approach. In fact, I think it's important in any teaching approach that there's note-taking space for those extensions and those explanations and those explorations that we go through in a good class. So I've got them all to just write their words, and we've shared them. All right, now I'll say, well, let's go a little bit further. Let's try to put these words into actual sentences. So they'll go back to those 4 words that they created, and I'll say to them, just underneath that, I want you to make each word into a sentence. Now, let's be flexible with it, Let's say, and if you don't want to use all of your words, you could always use any of those other words that you heard other students come up with in our discussion about the vocabulary there. And you know, they may find that that's a better word, or that's a word that they're more interested in exploring. So this initial stage of thinking of words shared with the group can then come back into this sentence creation here, and they could make whatever sentence that they like. And what I'm doing here is I'm just showing how I would mark out on the whiteboard how they can use this grid to make the spaces to create their sentences. So they'll make 4 sentences there, based on those 4 words or any words that were shared with the group. We'll then share our sentences with the group. Same basic process we went through with the words. And again, based on our teaching and our work on the whiteboard, we'll come up with suggestions on how some of the sentences could be better, or things we could add to them, or just things that are good about them. I think too many people get stuck on this idea that teaching unplugged is just fixing errors. My approach to teaching unplugged is to say, hey, now that's a really cool thing you've used in your sentence there, and here's how we could do it in another situation. Here's how we could take that pattern and use it in other situations. Sometimes it's just a matter of taking a good use of language and showing how that could be used in different ways in different situations. So don't think it's always just about error correction. But again, I've allowed some space here on the side for that to happen. So we've got a vocabulary brainstorm, we've got some sentence work that we've shared with the group, which expands that initial concept idea from the word and put it more into more expressive language. Now, what am I going to do next? Well, maybe I want the learners to think about talking to each other more now. And I might say, right, for your grids down here, I want you to divide this section at the bottom evenly into 3 boxes. Okay, so this is our third little application on this page. And again, remember, they're actually just drawing lines over the top of their grid to create these spaces, which we are demonstrating on the board as well. It looks a bit scrappy the way I've done it here, but it looks a lot better when you're just drawing over the grid. And with these 3 boxes here, I might say to them, right, what I'd like you to do here is to chat to 3 other people in the group, in the classroom, and what does summer mean to them? We might brainstorm some prompts as a group. Rather than just telling them, do this, we might say, well, here's a couple. Let's think together about a couple of different ways we could discuss summer with other people. We might just say, come up with prompts as a group. We might need to help them a little bit. What does summer mean to you? What are your plans for this summer? What did you do last summer? Is summer your favorite season? Why or why not? You know, we're talking pretty basic. I'm not talking an advanced level here, although you could easily make this for advanced students as well. Because the language is coming from the learners and we're working with that language, it's very non-level specific, which is one of the fantastic things about teaching unplugged. Because at an advanced level, they may come up with pretty advanced words here and quite advanced sentences, and we work with those accordingly. Whereas a very low level might come up with very basic words and basic sentences, and again, we just work with what we have, what's coming out of those learners. Excuse me. So this third section of the first page, we're just going to get them to interact and take some notes based on what they find out from their classmates. And again, we share the results to the group. We all report to the group what we found out. And as a teacher, I'd get in and do this too. I would have my own worksheet and I would go around and ask some questions about summer and write down some notes to set a good example and to be part of this group activity, not just the sort of the commander, to be a participant in this process. And again, based on what we share as a group and what we talk about, maybe I'm making a couple of little language notes on the board, and the learners can take down the notes that are relevant to their own what they found out here, or just other things that interest them based on other learners reporting what they found out and what we report and how we deal with that language, which is one of those things I really love about teaching unplugged. It could be about the learner's own language, or it could be about the whole group. So I'm sorry, I'm just waving goodbye to my kids and family who are just off to the park. So there you go, there's a spanner in the works, but a good one. So there's our first page. Now what am I going to do on this second page? Well, again, with teaching, look, this is not one set. This is only one of 10 different ways I might teach this, and I might change my mind before I walk into the class that day. Or I might do it completely different with one group to the next. This approach that I've presented here, I think, is good for those learners who need a little bit of structure, who need a sort of simple starting point which then expands. Other groups, we might start with something more like what I'm going to show you on the second half of the page. You know, you can mix and match this according to your groups, their experience with teaching, learning unplugged, their experience with you and each other. You know, it will vary by group and by that classroom dynamic. But here what I might do is say, well, we've done some interaction, we've done some language work. Let's go a bit deeper now and personalize this a little bit more and encourage a bit more sort of thinking. And what I might say is, as a group, let's come up with 5 different things we could do here. I might just give them the options, I might let them suggest some, depends on the group. And this box here, well, we're going to use it in whatever way sort of suits you guys. We could say one of your options is to write a story about summer. And you can use that grid there just to write over the top and make a story about summer. By having a grid, the cool thing is they could draw a box up in the corner there and sketch something if they're into drawing, or they might draw a map here, they might draw a picture, and then they could write their story around it. And that grid's great because it facilitates that. So they might write a story about summer. Another option I might give them is to pair up with someone and have a talk about summer, very naturally, just have a chat about summer. It could be anything to do with summer. You could be in a certain location and the season happens to be summer, or you could be talking about the weather. But whatever, you be creative. You know, see what you come up with together. And then based on your conversation, try to write out what you guys actually said. So have your talk and then go back together and think, now, what did we just say together? And actually write a script based on your conversation, and you can fill it in here in the grid. And that allows them to do something like this. They could divide their grid in half and have one person's contributions on this side and the other person's on the other side. I might get them to, if I've got access to computers in the classroom, I might say, look, go on the internet and go on YouTube and type in the word summer in the search box on YouTube. See what you come up with on the videos there. Choose the one that really appeals to you in some way and write a summary about that video. Or look for 3 videos about summer, 3 different videos about summer, and write a quick summary of the 3 there. And obviously with this grid, then what they would do is divide it into 3 sections like this. Okay. They would just draw lines to evenly divide their grid into 3 parts. They would write the name of the video on the left and then write their summary on the right. Or they could just look for 2 videos and just divide that grid into 2 sections. They might look and find a video and write a quick summary about it. Then they may work with another student and ask them about the video they found, and then we would divide our grid down the middle, and they would write a summary of their video, and then they would write down notes based on what they heard from a partner about the video that person chose. And then they've got their summary and their research and the other student's summary and research. But you know, that's assuming you've got access to something like YouTube. This part of the lesson could be done at home. It could be done outside the classroom. It could be a follow-up to the lesson where we say, now I want you to go home and look at YouTube and write your summaries here. Maybe even call up your classmate and ask them about the video that they made and take your notes down. These sorts of things are great little extensions that just take that lesson out of the classroom and bring it more into the learner's own lives. But again, we've got this space on the left. This space on the left, I think, for the more independent and multiple choice option of what they do with the extension, I might actually get them to hand their work into me, and then this space on the right, you know, I'm doing corrections or suggestions or pointing out what really worked with what they did there. So this could be a little bit more personalized, whereas the space here was more of sort of group work off the whiteboard. Here it might be more specific to whatever option that they chose. Again, you've got so many options when you teach unplugged that you might start with the YouTube or the story or whatever, and then make that A, and then go back and do something more like this in the B section. And that is, based on all this stuff we've done about summer, choose 4 words that you think really sum up summer. Now make them into sentences, now share them. So this could be the second part of the lesson. This could be more of a structured approach based on a more open approach, or we could go with a more structured sort of sequence here and then open it up. Different groups will respond to different methods, and even your mood or your situation on the day could dictate what works. Now, one question you might have is, well, these are good ideas, these are good teaching ideas, why not just make the material like this to start with? Why don't we just jot it all in and print it up like that? Well, you could, if that's what you like, but bear in mind that the moment you make a material and you set it out in one way, it's very tempting to only use it in that way every time you print it up. Okay, or you have it sitting there, and it's almost too tempting just to do it the same way each time. Whereas if you just use a grid, all right, you are constantly challenging yourself for different ways to teach, different ways to present material, different ways to get your learners interacting and doing stuff. So that's why grids are really good. An open grid like that is a really good challenge to you, as well as what you're doing with the whole group. Another thing to bear in mind is that a lot of the stuff I've just shown you, it doesn't need to be pre-prepared in terms of formatting. If you've got a grid there, it's very easy just to draw boxes over it and put numbers in it and then write on these lines. If that's the sort of stuff we can do in the classroom, just by demonstrating on the whiteboard, why do we need to pre-print it? Why do we need to put it in a format that is written in stone? If it can be malleable and it can be adjusted and it can be presented quite clearly on the whiteboard, why doesn't the material just facilitate whichever of the methods we choose on the day? That's, I think, one of the key things about good materials design. Some of you may be looking at this and thinking, hang on, materials design's about having a nice full page here full of stuff to do and full of information. I see it a bit differently. I think materials design should motivate the learners and see that this was planned, that the idea was that I've thought about this and I've thought about what we might do today, but I'm facilitating your input and your participation in this lesson, and I'm also trying to facilitate you walking away with something that looks nice, that looks pretty professional, but you were part of it. You and the other people in the room were part of that. And that can be extremely motivating, not just for the learners, but also for you. Because when you see what your learners can come up with on these sorts of open formats, you're just like, wow, I didn't see that coming. Wow, geez, it looks a lot better than anything I could have formatted. So this is the summer template for an unplugged teaching approach. I know I've gabbed on about it a lot, but I needed to show you some of the design features. Something to think about in your teaching approach and your materials design approach, and it really showcases that interface between materials and methodology, that your materials facilitate your methods and keep your methods flexible and challenging to yourself, and can invite that participation from the learners, that they can become part of the materials design process. So something to bear in mind. This is Jason from English Raven. Thanks for coming along for another materials design tutorial.